faith to work
Yeah,
this
man.
wonder.
Listen, man. I actually just left the concert. Matter of fact, they were still breaking down, man. They they,
This
they,
dude.
they were still breaking down, man. They had one more guy, man, that was gonna go, but he he was in the corner asleep. So they was like,
Like the Juneteenth
yeah,
Juneteenth parade 2 years ago. People
man,
were still in that parade the next day and
man,
never
yeah,
see so many black people in a parade.
man.
It was
Listen
just
here,
like,
man.
so anyway. Well, shout out to the good folks there at the Easter Bash. I look, that's part of descendants of enslaved Africans tradition. Long church services,
Listen here, man. When I tell
man.
you, Jesus himself left, came back, and was like, dude, get it
Yes.
over with already, man. Everybody go
When I
home.
was a little guy, I lived in Tennessee with my uncle and aunt, and on Sunday, you in church literally
Man.
all day.
Yeah.
You didn't
You
have to
know,
be in Tennessee for that to happen. You could have been
Rehoboth
at Rehoboth.
on 20, what was that, 27th and Hadley?
20, 28. Well, it's 2830 West Hadley Street.
Oh my God. Listen, we got to church at 8 and then leave to
That's Sunday
10
school.
o'clock that night.
man,
That's
it-
after
it-
YPWW.
I said,
Sunday
Jesus himself did rest, didn't he? Like, didn't he go to sleep?
man, I know my aunt and uncle, they would bag up everything, pack up the food, because
Yeah.
after church you're gonna have
Yeah.
a dinner,
Yeah.
then you have afternoon service,
Yeah.
then they have
YPWW,
evening service,
yeah.
YPWW or BTU if you Baptist.
BTU,
Right.
yeah.
You
Right.
know, and it was just like, wow, can we go home?
Don't let there be
Man.
no singing that takes place in that early afternoon.
And I'm gonna get to y'all just real quick.
They're like, yeah, you're like,
We do
what?
have guests.
Oh, are we?
But let me say
interviewing?
something though. When I was a teenager and we were singing in the choirs,
Mhm.
I didn't mind.
Me neither,
I
Doc.
mean,
I'm with you.
we be there all day
Yeah, you
Sunday.
look forward to it.
I'm
Oh,
gonna be honest,
singing
man,
somebody
I didn't-
else's church.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be honest.
yeah, somebody else's church, right? You man, I didn't mind that so much, but dude,
Man, I was
Now-
looking forward to it because I wanted to see all the girls in a different choir.
man, that,
Oh, now
that-
we get.
Hey, I'm telling the truth, mother.
Well,
Shame the
that's-
devil. I'm gonna
that's-
tell the
that's
truth
what got me in the
and
choir.
shame the devil. Amen.
Cricket got me in the choir. Then I'm like, oh, I actually like the music.
Hey.
Yeah, I was stalking.
Jeez, you sorry.
So anyway,
Thank the
shout out
Lord
to
for
everyone. Again, people asked me, we had a wonderful resurrection. We had 27 kids yesterday,
Oh, that's awesome.
and we had a young lady who she did a praise dance. We didn't know that, I don't know if she learned that expression, and to be able to do that, it's amazing when I look at that form of dance at God, Mother. I was going to say Mother Pitts. God, Mother Sims' funeral
Oh, Mother Sims.
and Jenny Boston's.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
amazing.
They were there on yesterday, man, and
Yeah, man, they
another
did a good job,
phenomenal.
too.
Were they?
Yeah, phenomenal as always.
Yeah, man. They did
So
a
what an
good job.
excellent segue.
That's a great segue.
Excellent segue we have in us. The founder of Kothi Dance Company. I'm not going to talk about just how far back I go, but right around the corner there at Francis Parkwood Junior High School, you guys had just started and you were performing there. I was such a little guy, Miss Fern Calker. And look at that.
See, good. Oh, my
Oh, yeah, Jerry Vance?
I remember him.
Yeah, I worked with his son. And Miss Asha Sawyer.
Yes, yes.
How are you all?
I am well.
We're here to talk about Kothi. And you've been doing this. Your background, first of all, you're originally from Sierra Leone.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit. People hear that name. What is Sierra Leone? Talk about how that country even got started. It has a fascinating.
Well, Sierra Leone has a very close link to African Americans. We're right next door to a country called Liberia,
Liberia, yeah.
and there's a whole cultural link with the people that are called the Creoles. You know, there's a story about Cinque, who was a slave who came over, and they had a mutiny on a slave ship, and it became a famous movie in the United States and went through the United States court. Amistad. And in fact, when they won the case, they went back, and it was Sierra Leone that they went back to.
Mm.
And Cinque himself had Sierra Leone ties. So there's always been a link. As a child growing up, I remember used to be a huge cotton tree in right where the ships used to dock. there were slave ships, just slave steps, just like they have in New Orleans, going up into the slave houses, before they went into the auction. This cotton tree has been there, and the cotton tree is like a big, huge redwood tree. They're there for centuries. And I remember there being carvings on the cotton tree in history. But because of the European colonialism, let's say, and if you don't own your story, then somebody else can come and rewrite your story. So that was never really taught. And from what I understand now, that tree has kind of died instead of it being preserved because it was such a historic legacy in Sierra Leone.
So, weren't there either formerly enslaved or freed Africans from America that went to settle in Sierra Leone? Is that part of the?
Yes.
So, would that
is a
be
part.
your family, or you part
No,
of the
my family
indigenous?
was part of indigenous. On my father's side, my mother was African American,
Oh, okay.
and my father was Chebro, a Chebro man from what they call upcountry folk, and so, but there are people in Sierra Leone that were known as Creoles, and Creoles are people who have ancestral links to freed slaves. And in fact, one of the wedges that the Europeans used was to separate the Creoles because they were slightly lighter in color. And again, here we go. They made them feel that they were better than the people who came from, quote, up country, who were darker or what have you. So it's the same principle.
When I was in college, this young lady I was dating, and she was at Dickerson College in Pennsylvania. And one of her classmates was the daughter of President Tolbert in Liberia's doctor.
Mhm.
And so they were able to get out before. I think that would have been Sergeant Dell, right? I think they probably did let that insurrection there. But that was that whole thing about how the freed American Africans came in, and they became then the dominant folks there, controlled the land, controlled the government. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's real, and it played out throughout the whole African diaspora. In the Caribbean, the whole thing about color, in the South, the house Negroes, the house servants were lighter. A lot of them were descendants of the master's seed. And then the darker slaves were the ones who worked in the fields. And that wedge has been used consistently whenever white people came in contact with Africans.
And we'll move on, but it was like in Uganda, where the British then brought in the Indian, and in South Africa, where they brought in the Indian.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, Gandhi is how he got to South Africa. And so the people who would be like the bureaucrats, the government people, tended to be Indian.
Right.
And I'm not even going to talk about some of the parallels I see happening in America today.
We could go down a real long tunnel with that.
What attracted you to dance?
How long do we have to talk about? What attracted me to dance was that as a child, I grew up in Africa. I grew up around hearing the music. I grew up around my father I listened to every kind of music. I love classical music. I grew up listening to all of it. Drumming was a part of what I heard my childhood. My father, even though he was a minister, was a traditional drummer. And he was initiated in what is known as the poro, the men's initiation, that I know nothing about, because if you're a woman, you're not allowed to know what they went to. But there's the female counterpart of that. It's the bundu, which my grandmother was a part of.
Is that like a rite of passage?
Yes. Okay. And except a lot deeper than that. So I just was surrounded by it. But I think, as I look at young people that we work with, and kids we've come in contact with, which is like Kothi has reached over 1 million children. And you guys up in here, have memories of us, right? Of being in your school when you were little TikToks. So anyhow, that's what I call them, TikToks. Yeah. But anyway, but the little ones, I look at them, and some kids come into the studio, they're already musicians. They are already dancers. They just needed to be guided to a technical source. And once you put the stick in their hand, or you teach them the rhythms with the drums, or you start giving them movement, you can see the light begin to come out from the ground to their feet and all the way up to their head. You can actually see it. And I don't think you can actually teach, you can't teach art to a kid. They already come to you with an artistic spirit. What you do is you give them tools. And I think sometimes we approach things the wrong way. We need to be giving our young people tools, because that's, for a lot of them, that's all they need, and they can fly.
And we were having that conversation about, for many of us, and even sounds like for you, the church is where a lot of times many of us get our musical beginnings.
Most of the Black jazz singers and jazz artists all started
R&B. I mean, then as we were talking about the young lady who did the praise dance, where now we're in well, we had dance. If you were Pentecostal, we had dance in church.
And it was very African, but we didn't know that.
Explain that when you say it's very African.
Because what Black people do when we celebrate that which is inner landscape spirituality, the natural thing that we do is move our bodies. And what we don't understand is that when, I've done research with the Gullah down in South Carolina, and when you talk about the Black church, you cannot not talk about the original circle dance that we were doing down south, and the things that the church was doing for Black people down south. This is long before we had pews and written music, and there was an actual preacher in the center. There was a circle, and everybody in the community danced in the circle, right? And there was no one leader, and it was free. The body was allowed to move. The only catch was that because they said you couldn't dance in the church, they said, okay, so we'll shuffle. So as long as you don't pick up your feet, right, then you can dance in the church. And so that's the origin of what we do. And when we say we got the Holy Spirit, it's the Holy Spirit, but it's also the ancestral spirits. Because when somebody say, oh, she got the Spirit, say, what spirit was that? Because in some African religions, they can tell you what spirit that is. It has a name.
In some Pentecostal traditions, they can tell you what spirit that is.
Exactly. Yeah, right. But see, we go from black to white. We'll say devil or righteous. But what's all in between? There's a whole lot between black and white. So everything is devil over here. It's either righteous or it's the devil. And that's confusing to some people who live in that space in the middle. And that's why the church had such a problem with people who were singing jazz for so long and demonized jazz singers. That's because he didn't understand. I mean, who is more spiritual than Miles Davis? Or he just listen to his music.
This is such an
Who's more spiritual?
Or Monk?
Who's more spiritual? Or Monk?
Monk was on a totally different frequency.
Coltrane. I mean, you want to talk about spirituality? Hey, get real.
So let me chime in here as a Christian, because I can't.
Hey, Asha.
I mean, y'all, how y'all doing?
Hey, welcome.
This is Asha, our new managing director at Cote Dance Company.
Hello.
Yay.
Thank you so much for the claps. And we are such a wonderful dynamic here, even as we have this conversation, because we've got, just the amazingness that is Mama Fern. And then we have a person in me that really spends a lot of time in the presence of the living God. And so while Coltrane and Monk have this spiritual feel to them and have this spiritual power in what they're doing, who is being glorified? And this is the funny thing. The cool thing is that all glory goes back to God. So even when you do something good, it goes back to your parents, right? What we live with our lives, we're honoring our parents with our lives, and then it goes back to their parents and all the way back to the one who made all things. All praise goes back to God. But when they're doing their work, right, they're doing their work to let this gift come out. But in Christ, Christians take their gift and put it at the feet of the one who made all things. And so this is where we get this difference. And it's not so much that the gray is bad as the gray is not laid at the feet of the one who made all things. And when you follow God, that's what you want to do. But when you don't, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying Christians are doing something.
Well, I think it's also, just my little social critique.
Mhm.
I think it's also Eurocentric that
Mhm.
I remember it's ironic the Pope died today, but there was a Pope who had gone, I'm trying to remember, I don't know if it was John Paul, had visited Africa,
Mhm.
and he was scolding the Africans for how they were doing their religious expression.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I think that, and as an ordained Baptist minister,
Okay.
Mhm.
I will say this. I appreciate, because I believe the Creator does, celebration.
Yes.
Celebration. Now
Yes.
we put in this whole religious thing spiritually, but what, because even the church stole this. There ain't no party like a Holy Ghost party. Well, no, that
Then they
ain't.
ain't seen some of the other parties on the
No,
planet.
well,
that celebrate-
that's what I'm saying. But they also say that
celebrate
at the
God,
same
too.
time. Where'd you get that from?
Right.
That sounds like from the club. The point is that when we go and I think that to be able to freely express ourselves as African people
Mhm.
and try to, I got a friend I talk about, because in the South, Craig will always get on me about this. In the South, there was this mixing of Europeans and Africans in the worship experience. So sometimes we have to extract out what is Scott Irish and Anglo-Saxon and what is African. But they melded. If you watch like Pentecostals at the church, looks real familiar. But I think that's we have this need for expression and appreciation and celebration. All cultures have that, and to me, spirituality, I like to put it into spirituality, and that the concept of God, like God has many names in the African continent. Look at the structure and the practice at the top of the pyramid, and look all the way down the structure of the Orisha, which we now see in Africa and the Caribbean and Brazil. That's not spirituality, it's not anti-God, because it's the same freaking structure as the Catholic Church. There's the God, and then there's Jesus, and there's saints, and then there are the priests and separate on the line. And then the saints. You can take the African view of our saints and superimpose them with some of the Catholic Church saints, and you see correlation. So, but you have to study that. And if you go to Brazil, you go to Haiti, you go to South America, anywhere in South America, Africa, people who are like practicing Orisha, right? And you think it's spooky. No, check out the lineage. And I've done that research. You can actually see the lineage. That's how Black people, when we came to this country, were able to hide our spiritual practices in those contexts. In Brazil, in particular, holding the names of Brazilian religion. And the strong Christian heritage that continent and philosophers like Christian and people that believe that Christianity are perceive anything that Europeans before they ever even touch Christianity is in the continent. Ethiopia is in the Bible. So there's a history of lots of religions, and we are never been. We are not now, nor have we ever been a monolith. We are a collection of human persons making decisions about how we're going to move through the experience of life. And so we have all different types of wrongs and choices that people are making about the lives they've been trusted with. So as long as their life is spirituality, I think that I don't care if you're Buddhist, I don't care if you're Muslim, I don't care if you're Jewish, I don't care if you're Christian. If you prophesy a faith that it should be reflected, give me that down. I'm gonna give you this offer, man. So, oh, I do this a lot. There we go. Because I don't care. Because I don't care. One of my best friends happens to very smart. One of my best friends used to talk like this all the time. It was about how to be in a country lie or not, and whether your palate is clean. I don't care how you wash what you have to do down by the river, you have to go to the altar. As long as I respect your spiritual practice, but we arrive at the same place as human beings. Love,
always says that I am sometimes wrong, but my the Bible is very clear. It's that the God of the Bible is not an anomaly. So that kind of puts me in this place where I'm over here by myself. I can't.
Why we
say
do
anything
this? Why we go to a break?
Yeah.
No, 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 no. Let's go to a break.
When he come back, I'm gonna jump in on that.
I'm not a Christian, whatever it is. So how did we're talking about this?
Well, yeah, because we don't get that card. That's why I want to get that. All right. You're listening to Community Voice with George.
Why am I here?
Close the door. We can ring off.
back, and we're joined in studio by the founder of Kothi Dance, Ms. Fern Calker, and you are the managing director, Miss Asha Sawyer.
Just stepped in the shoes.
Yes,
Let's
I
talk
did.
about the importance of art and some things that you all have coming up. But let's talk about the importance of art and particularly dance.
Well, I think that if you go back to the origin of man on the planet, of just as we evolved, if you believe in evolution, that movement and speech, movement as a form of speech, has always been a part of the human pantheos. So I feel that dance, because of who we are as a people, wherever African slaves enslaved ended up, we've dance has always been central to what it is that we've done. Whether you go look at Brazil, you go to the Caribbean, wherever we are, that's how we express our inner place and that's how we express our reason for being in the universe. That's how we express a relationship with something divine. That's always divine. And our music has always had a place that was centered. If we talked about Monk and Coltrane and Miles Davis, you talking about feeling and being in touch when they played their music with something very divine. Okay. So from the point of view of divinity, that's what I think dance is. I think that when you go into a class, dance helps you get in touch with your body and spirit at the same time. That's why for some people it can be very uncomfortable. You know, I've had students through the years that get into a beginning dance class, and the first thing I do is have them lie down on the floor on their backs and put their fingers across their belly and do deep breathing. And I've had young people actually break down, start crying. Okay, because they've never had a in-body experience where everything today is outside of, and our children are growing up with this little rectangular box called a phone and the iPhone, and the kids go out to breakfast with their parents and they're sitting there and the parents aren't talking to the kids because they hand them this tablet, and that's where their world exists. So they never actually touch themselves. They never actually find that breath, that divine breath is what I call it. And so the training of dance opens up your spirit and opens up your potential. And you know what? The people who enslaved African people knew that. This is why on the plantations they would not let us dance. This is why they would not let us play our drums. This is why we couldn't speak our languages, is because they knew that we had something divine in those processes. And so they blocked us. And what we're experiencing today in 2025 is a smashing of all of our culturalisms. And it's for that same reason, because they don't want us to think, they don't want us to be in touch. And when I say they, everybody who is within listening of this radio station knows who I'm talking about, do not want us to be on the path of the divine, in touch with a divinity. And I don't care what methodology you use to get there. If you need A and I need B, that's fine, because we're going to arrive. If it's pure, we're going to arrive at a divinity.
When we had folks like Martha Graham,
Yes.
was that rooted in Africanness?
No.
Oh.
Well, no. I have a theory about some of the older dancers, white dancers during that time, because Martha Graham and a lot of them, God bless her soul, was fascinated with the divinity of people of color. So she went and did a lot of research on East African and East Indian dance forms, etc. And she brought that back and melded it into her creative work as a modern dancer. And that was what catapulted her and her work. But I can look at some of her earlier works, and even the Graham technique has a very African kind of paradigm to it, But that's what all the artists, the white artists, were doing at that time. They were tapping into Africa. And while they're tapping into us, we're being untapped from us. That's an interesting paradigm, because you got something and somebody's sucking out of what you got. and at the same time stopping you from growing and learning inside of your own paradigm. So you end up in all these different places but yours, and you end up actually getting kicked in the butt. You walk into a room and you see somebody do something, you say, wow, that just blew my mind, and you don't even know that its essence is from your little toolbox. You don't even know that.
So when you 56 years ago when you started this, what was the initial reaction from descendants of
Oh,
enslaved
I
African people?
loved what was happening in the 60s and the 70s, because on one level, I see it in two ways. In the 60s and 70s, starting Kothi Dance Company, remember, James Brown, I'm black and I'm proud, and Malcolm X was walking the planet, and all these brothers were out here, and you could go and to hear them speak, which I did, and it was a whole different atmosphere. And at the same time, we were fantasizing about Africa. We went through a phase where everybody who is black comes from Africa, and we were telling kids, you're all kings and queens. We came from, everybody on that slave ship wasn't no king and queen. And like that's screwed up when you think about that. Now think about that. Ain't that silly? And we taught
thought my family
we
was.
taught, you know what I'm saying? But everybody wasn't no king and queen. Some people on that slave ship were the people who cleaned out the king's latrine. There were spiritualists on there. There were priests in there. There were just regular blow mama and papas in there. There were healers in there. And there was liars in there. There were cheaters in there. There were thugs in there. They were all up in that situation. And we got to understand that mix of humanity that we have.
You said something earlier about you were talking about a dance that's done in a circle.
Yes, the ring shout.
And for African people, the circle's important.
Very much so.
I think that in other spaces it's more linear.
Yes.
Where there's this hierarchy and you work your way around. But in the circle, I'm asking them. I'm curious. So now we do a lot of line dancing. Is that about the same? Or is that
I think the ultimate reason is community.
Okay.
The reason why it's just, whether it's a circle and then it turns into a line or what have you, the result is that it's giving us a sense of belonging and a sense of unity. Everybody's doing the same step together. People are talking and laughing and moving, and the rhythm is it's doing the same thing. But I don't think that we are culturally connected. You asked me about the 60s and the 70s. Is, one of the things we did was we set up a myth and then we threw it at our kids. But look at what the Jews look at what the Jews do in terms of their training of their children, right? They go to the regular schools and hang out with other kids, but on Saturdays, where are they? Where are they kids?
Synagogue.
They're in the synagogue. And see, the synagogue reinforces their cultural history. But I can't say that about all black churches. I cannot say that. I cannot say that when you go into a black church, I do, that they're going to accept my Africanness, my African drumming, my African dance. If it's not based on JC, it's not spiritual. And that's a problem for me. That's a real problem for me, because the reason why Jewish children grow up understanding their Jewishness is that what is taught in the synagogue is directly related to their Jewish history. And then it's also tied to rituals that they do through the holidays. They just came through one where they, the parsley dipped in salt, the flat bread, right? They teach these children these things that are imagery. Now, Ron Karanga understood this, and I remember listening to him talk in the 70s, and he was disturbed about the fact that we didn't have our churches linked, embodied to the history and to the diversity of us as a people. Some churches don't like people who are gay. Some churches don't, you can't be gay and come up in this church because that's anti whatever. What has happened is that we've actually started pulling apart when we actually had an amazing unit of strength Okay. And what we're living today is a perfect example of how um, diverse, how divisive it can be if you're not a unit as a people.
I'm reading a book right now called Erasing,
Mhm.
and it talks about the erasure that we're seeing in history.
Mhm.
There are many people very concerned about. I mean, even if you look at the Kennedy Center, but certainly
Absolutely.
the attack on, particularly
Smithsonian.
the Smithsonian, and being able to understand history. And I think it's real important that what you talk about that goes on in Sabbath and Sabbath school
Mhm.
is there's also religion,
That's right.
but there's also the culture and the history.
In the history.
And I think that, but I think there was a separation where we never tied culture. Well, we did culture.
What
Mhm.
about the Black church in the 60s? What were they like at that time? Because
Oh,
we get Martin
very-
Luther King, we get
very
we-
political.
yeah.
Very political, very grassroots down into the communities,
Mhm.
feeding a lot of the breakfast programming that the Panther Party did was
Panther
done
Party
in the
did, yeah.
basements of Black churches.
Yes.
And people
Freedom
just don't,
School.
people don't realize how
They bombed churches because they were so powerful.
exactly.
Mhm.
This is the thing. And see what is beginning to see. It's not all churches, obviously, but a lot of churches spend a lot of time. It's all about money now, and it's all about buildings and putting up, huge big buildings and ATMs and tithing. And at the same time, like I had a conversation with some people in this community who like I was talking to African American Children's Theater, Hansbury Sands. These are arts groups that are now died in Milwaukee, don't exist anymore.
The
Right?
Echo
We don't even
Writers Workshop.
celebrate that they existed. We've just wiped them out of the map. And
Mhm.
we used to talk about the fact that their competition for teaching theater and dance and all that to Black kids was the Black church. So if I wanted to teach dance in a Black church in the 20s, right?
Mhm.
I had to be a member of the church, and I could only do, quote, praise dance, right? So then you get into a whole different conversation about what is praise dance.
Do you think that, and I don't want to, it's not a critique on, but just in terms of, again, because of the cultural influences on religion, do you think that for many years we rejected what was considered African? Like,
We were taught to.
yeah, that rejection was there, but yet it was still there. I mean, our mode of worship is African. But that whole cultural piece where understanding that part of our religious experience has everything to do with culturally and ethnically what we are, right? I mean,
Right. And you know who understands that? The powers that be. That's why the first thing they do is eradicate, erase. It's sad because we don't understand it, but they do. When I hear certain people in the government today say we're going to eradicate the Muppets.
Mm.
And if you think about Sesame Street,
those subversives.
think about, look, Sesame Street when it first started was about the ghetto.
Come on now.
Come on now, let's be real. Those characters came straight off the street in New York City and Harlem. They did their research.
Yes.
Project 2025, read it. Read it. Because there ain't nothing going on now that wasn't in that document.
Mm. Mm.
So
We didn't do our homework.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Oh, he just wanted to show you his Sesame Street band.
They turned my band into the
Yeah,
Muppets.
right.
Oh my goodness.
Asha, are you a dancer?
Oh my goodness. Actually, I used to I absolutely love dance. So I grew up in a really interesting way, but dance has always been an anchor for me. And so I used to do African dance when I was in high school. Got a picture I got to show you about that. And then I grew up in the church dancing. And I went from dancing in the church to choreographing in the church to choreographing bodies of churches. And I've always danced.
You know, when I was asking you what the reaction was to you starting Cold Feet, now timing is everything. I just happened to be at a authentically Black Black affirming junior high school,
Okay.
which made we were fertile for you all to come in because we have been
Mhm.
programmed to embrace
Mhm.
our Blackness.
Mhm.
I ended up going to Dominican and they interviewed me and they asked me, so what was it like coming from Milwaukee? He didn't want to ask what was it like coming from an all Black school, going to a
Mhm.
predominantly white school. And I said, it was an adjustment because I came from where everything was Black affirming, right?
Mm,
Everything from when I
yeah.
heard Kothi or saw Kothi.
It wasn't strange.
Yeah, no, and I'm just saying, so all of that, and now I find myself in this environment,
Mm.
and you're kind of going like, oh, I value this, but what was put into me in terms of embracing, and then let me thank my mother for this, a fair-skinned Black woman who would tell us that the Blacker you are, the more beautiful you are.
Mhm.
And so then there was never this negative sense of what
Mhm.
complexion was.
Mhm.
And that's a major. You talked about that divide in
Yes.
Sierra Leone, just all these things to kind of divide us. And then even when we talked about like the election,
Mhm.
when we were talking about how if they don't want you to vote, they see the power of your vote, they try to suppress you from voting.
Right.
They see the power of your culture,
Right.
they
Suppress
erase
it.
your culture.
Exactly.
Because I heard revolution is a change of mind,
Mhm.
and that how we're able to then go in and envision ourselves. And I'm not African chauvinist. I do not believe in any superior people,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I'm not an inferior person
Come on
either.
now.
Right. And you
Say
can
that.
be both.
You can be both.
But it's like I told somebody, a funder, a long time ago. I said, I can verify that the kids who come to Kothi, the little drummers, like this little guy right here, right, who said, drumming makes me strong, gesturing to his muscle arms, and drumming makes me strong here, gesturing to his heart. That's little Judah. He was like 8 years old when he said that. I mean, 7 or 8 years old. Is it one of the things that most I think is most important here is that you do not want people to be totally engaged in their own spiritual beingness and mental alertness and soul touching, because if they do that, then they begin to like blossom. And the problem is that we have a lot of people in the United States. The American educational system definitely needs revamping, because it's not just Black people who don't know about ourselves. There's white people who don't know their history either.
Mhm.
There's white people who are feeling alienated and threatened. Like this hasn't happened before. Germany and the Nazis, who were the scapegoats? Jews.
Jews,
Okay,
gays,
so now, right now,
gypsies.
scapegoats are our Latino, our brown brothers and sisters. They're the scapegoats. And who's going to be the next scapegoat, y'all? So we have to be much more alert. We have to be willing. How do you teach a community who does not read, will tell you they don't like to read? I had somebody tell me, say, I don't like to read books. And I'm thinking, oh my God. If where their only form of education is little snippets that they get from Google
or TikTok.
and TikTok. How do you tell somebody that if you don't put your hands on a book and hurry up because they're banning the books that we should be putting our hands on? Why are they banning, certain books? Why? What's in that? My automatic reflex is I'm going to go get that book because I want a T-shirt that says I read banned books. Because if you ban it, I'm going to go get it.
And I think that we have created this thing. Race is a construct, and so we've created this thing called whiteness,
which doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Exactly.
But as Hassan Jeffrey says, that even though race is a construct, racism is real.
Mm-hmm. It has a cause and effect.
There's an impact out there, but in my first political science class, they talked about nationalism. That's the first thing there's a national think. There's a way that Americans think. There's a way that Germans think. There's a national think. And but the thing that has buttressed it, really, America, when the 1619 project came out, people were pushing back. Oh, it wasn't slavery. It was slavery.
Exactly.
And slavery wasn't America's original sin. America's original sin was stealing the land from the indigenous people.
Exactly.
But its second original sin was then bringing bodies to work that land that built the wealth. And part of it, and then it was real interesting how I heard this thing, we came over on different boats, but we're in the same boat now. But that whole different boat piece, something you talked about. So you would put a Hausa in with a Igbo, they can't communicate.
They can't even communicate. They don't speak the same language.
So you can't even talk
Right.
about
That's
rebellion because part of rebellion is being able to communicate.
Exactly.
So it's all those things, and then coming down, and then the other piece of it is then to say that somehow African culture, indigenous culture was inferior culture.
Look, I have people who have a problem with, they would have a problem coming in my home because I have African masks all over the place,
No.
and they're considered to be pagan.
Well, let me tell you,
You see what I'm saying? It's like, that's deep. Now, I must say that in 2024, 25, in this era, a lot more Americans are going back to Africa and seeing for themselves and experiencing it for themselves. That's really, really important. That's why the country Ghana has opened up and said, you African American, you can come here. We'll make you a citizen, dual citizenship, right?
And just for those people, just real quickly, who there were obviously Africans involved with the African slave trade. But let me say this to Ghana. They apologized.
Yes, they did.
They
And they're
apologized.
making amends.
Yeah,
That's
they
why you can go
apologized.
over there as an African American and you can buy land and you can build a house. But look, every country has skeletons.
All people. Yep.
Every human being has skeletons.
That part.
And so what faith is about is finding the faith that works for you, that helps heal you. If it's healing you, I'm 100% in favor of you going 100%.
If your religion doesn't make you a better person, you need a new religion.
Come
I'll just
That's
put
right.
it out there.
That's right.
I think it's interesting you were talking about, and I was talking about this reaction. I was at a pretty prominent church back in I grew up there, and back in '70, a black artist donated a picture of Black Jesus
I remember that incident.
at Metropolitan, and
I remember that
the
incident.
Negroes at that church
They had
lost their minds
Yes,
because
it was
Jesus
black.
ain't black.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they
the
did.
Bible say Jesus. All right.
I'm just telling you.
It's skin of bronze. Listen. Check
But
my,
I'm just,
check my
but,
Facebook.
but this is called,
I ended Black History Month with Psalm of Solomon's I am black and beautiful.
yeah. But you know what? That's what you call a mind, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, it's programming. And
When you
That's sad.
think that Jesus has to be white, where do you go from there?
Matter of fact,
That's horrible.
they know that people won't read. So if you put the truth and hide it in a book, they know people's not
well,
going to
let me tell you why people won't read. If this is just Keith's observation, people will read the Bible.
Right.
Black
Will-
folks,
will they?
yeah, no, black folks will read the
Oh,
Bible.
yeah,
You'd be
can quote it,
amazed,
can
but
quote
they
you'd
it,
be
skip some-
amazed that
and
even
quote
some
it
of
to
some of
work.
the biggest winos will be able to quote
Quote.
scripture. But let me put it in a cultural context. If you talk to indigenous African people, Sunday is missionary Sunday, mission Sunday. So I have to talk about that. They talk about the missionaries come in. So what did the Africans say? They left us the Bibles, but they took the land. You will have the redacted slave Bible, anything that led to humanity, anything that led to self-determination was stripped from that Bible. And then something you talked about, then we have an anti-intellectual thing going on where we're having a debate. I just got a text email yesterday about a debate where I have said science is science, knowledge is knowledge, the divine is the divine. And what we've been taught was that somehow if you went in and you learned, somehow that wasn't spiritual. That is not true. That it has been
That's the construct that you do when you're the oppressor.
Yeah, if I
It's
can
straight
keep you
out of
from
the
knowledge,
playbook.
yeah,
It's straight out of their playbook.
yeah. If I can keep you from knowledge,
Right.
you won't
Right.
know.
As
You
long
won't
as you
grow.
feeling and believing,
Grow.
and you, because we say all the time, get out your feelings, and people will pimp your emotions.
Mhm,
And we put such a, and look, to my ancestors who would say that I don't want a God that I can't feel. That's one part of it. But there's another God that we experience in terms of science. There's a term we use in theology called God is omnipotent, all-knowing knowledge. You can
exactly.
value knowledge. And here's the
Yes.
thing. Then we do that BET religion. The BET religion is that all those little slogans we hear, and
Right.
that's what we run with. Where all I'm saying to folks is use your religion to empower you,
To learn more.
to raise, and what you will find. I had a buddy, he passed, elder in the Church of God in Christ. And I asked him, because we both went to college together, I said, the more you read, are there more questions?
Absolutely should be.
And so what people will do is stop reading because they're uncomfortable
Yeah.
with
With
the question, and then what the answer might be.
Well,
So, but can we do this real quick? 'Cause I
Yep.
know we got to go. This went by fast.
Upcoming show.
Upcoming shows.
Upcoming shows. So listen, as a result of the things that are happening in the United States today, right? We had to look at how much of our budget comes from government funding. And so part of our rationale and reboot of Kothi Dance Company is to rethink through how do we interface with our community? How do we interface with our audiences? And how do we build this new revived continuity of faith construct, peace construct, body intellectual, body knowledge, right? Because if somebody feels good about their body, they're going to treat other people differently. Okay. It starts in here. So we decided to put together a show called a series called the Ngoma series, Travel Through Dance. And because we wanted to show the diversity of the African continent and the diaspora. So March 20th, we did Ghana, and we had Ishmael Kone, who is from Ghana, who's now a professor at UWM in the dance department. He put some Ghanaian work on the company. Then June 24th, we're doing Guinea. We're going to do dances from Guinea because they're different. And then we're going to move the August show to the fall, where we'll be experiencing Mali. Then down the road in 2026, we'll do something like South African boot dance and talk about that, and step dancing that we do in this country, how those things are related. We'll talk about dances from the Caribbean, how that's related. I can't live long enough to cover all that Black people have in terms of arts in the world.
You know, it's interesting because I have met folks. I think after Nigeria, they probably have one of the largest populations. But meeting the people from Mali,
Very different.
yeah, meeting the
You
people.
talk about spiritual.
Yeah.
Because the Mali people have the Dogon, and the Dogon people are the and the Dogon are the people who have a whole pattern of understanding the universe and the stars. And they're the ones who discover the star that is behind another star that blew the scientologists out of the water. It was the Dogon people who had that in their spiritual campaign. See, so when we disconnect the African spirituality, we're disconnecting the sources that go back way thousands of years. I mean, they have a whole dance thing with masked characters. The characters actually have masks that are crawled, and they bend down into the stars, and they actually name a star that has now become the Europeans discovered. Wow, they said that star was there for a reason. Now, on that. So if people wanna come experience, and the whole idea of these shows is that they're not going to be theater, they have to be that studio, and it's $25. You come in and very informal, you get a chance to interview and talk and ask questions. That's all the show is trying to count it up. We need the community to come out, because I know money is tight. I know eggs cost a ridiculous amount, but I want to make sure that the egg brain of our baby. Amen. So everything she just said, all of this stuff out that she shared with you on our website, go to be.org, and it's
Aaron Calker, Joshua Singers, okay, Dan, thank you. What a enlightening conversation. It sounds like it. Oh my God.
I think what I want to do is come in one day and bring some of the books that I got that were written by African.
Well, you got a very receptive audience here because
Yeah,
I,
I mean, so
I love books.
there's books out there now that talk about African spirituality and people as you use them to pay for it.
And I would suggest, because she was a teacher of mine at Evelyn Different Baptist, she was written by Harvard. She's at Harvard now. She's probably the book that Henry Louis Gates did, The Black Church. But read his chapter on the Holy Spirit. Read the chapter on it. He did that as an addendum to that book. And it was fascinating piece where he goes back to Africa talking about the Holy Spirit.
He's a major, he's considered a major threat because you know the that we got there. I bought that. And all the references like
And I want to recommend Vincent Bantu if you want to know anything more about roots of Christianity in the motherland.
Mhm.
Long before Europeans ever came to Vincent Bantu. Vincent Bantu, he is a PhD African American, well, actually is Egyptian, but he is the foremost expert on Christianity. Check out Vincent Bantu.
All right, we got to go.
Now we knew that because of how the sun is.
I rest my case.
You listen to Community Boys real
And just this weekend, what did they show? They showed the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
And
was all white.
the only black people you saw
None of
in
these
there
people represent the God of the Bible. These represent Europeans who are trying to control
That's
our
a
minds.
great actor.
Right.
He was from the whitest part of the planet and looked nothing like the indigenous people. Well, that was a good break. We're going to be right back.
with your host.
Welcome back to Community Voice and staying with the arts. We have Mr. Ty Williams. He is the chief programmer for. Did I give you a new title that
Yeah.
gets you some more money? For a Black Lens, part of Milwaukee Film, and on April 24th we start the Milwaukee Film Festival.
Yes, indeed. It's going to be so much fun. I am so excited to be here and talk about some of the films that we're going to have.
And we are giving away tickets. So just so people will probably ask a trivia question, see if who's paying attention. All right. Wow. You know what? I always do this. I just go through the catalog. You start at the beginning. Go to page 35. Turn to page 35, please. Page 35. Page 35. And Janice Ian, Breaking Silence. I'm looking at this. She I don't know if she could consider a one-hit wonder, but she had this song that came along when she came out. But as Janice Ian had one of the most remarkable debuts in modern music history at the age of 13. She began performing her original songs at the New York City gigs alongside future legends. From there, the precocious teenager turned fearless singer, songwriter built a career with many chapters, winning Grammys while navigating personal and professional highs and lows in a remarkable trajectory. I'm trying to remember the movie she came out, the song that she came out with, but it was kind of like an anthem, for teenagers. And let me pull it up real quickly. So I'm going to do that. So start us off, man. Where are we gonna?
Yeah. So kind of in relation to Janice Ian, one of the films that I got for this year's film festival is Any Other Way, the Jackie Shane story. Just reading off that description for you. Blending music, unreleased phone conversations, and soulful animated reenactments. Any Other Way, the Jackie Shane story provides a powerful account of Jackie Shane's life in her own words, a compelling tribute to a groundbreaking life, an artist and trailblazer in music and LGBTQ rights. This documentary not only gives her the recognition she deserves, but also introduces her to a new generation fighting for their right to be their true selves. Very influential artist, I believe, also was kind of one of the reasons for Little Richard's whole thing. Not necessarily the reason, but was definitely an influence for him as well. And just a really interesting story about her life in general. It very much resonated with me. So if you are interested in music documentaries like the Janice Ian one, then the Jackie Shane one might also.
Yeah, her song was at 17.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
I remember when that song, so dealing with teenage angst, and that song came out in 1975.
Wow.
What else you want to highlight?
Yeah, so we got 40 Acres. That one is part of Black Lens as well, of our Cinema Huligante program. So that's for people who like more wacky films, kind of like the horror stuff. This is, I'll just read the description for this one too. In a post-apocalyptic future where food is scarce, the last descendants of a Black family of farmers who settled in Canada after the American Civil War must protect their homestead from an organized militia hell-bent on taking their land. Structured like a typical apocalypse film, 48 Acres subverts expectations in ways that will leave you breathless. With a terrific ensemble cast led by Daniel Deadweiler from Station 11 and Till, this action thriller captivates and surprises. And one of the things that really captured me about this film as well is that one of the characters speaks their native tongue of Cree within the film and is just sort of a character like speaking their native language that you don't necessarily see depicted a lot in films authentically. And to have that within a fictional zombie film was quite the juxtaposition, but it also makes it feel that much more realistic when you're watching it. So horror movie fans, I would say check that one out.
For all you folks who were around in 1983, Stand Together as One. And that was on the making, it looks like the making of the song We Are the World, that had been put together, all these artists. There's another documentary out on the making of this. It says like One Night in History or something, like with all these artists come together. Yeah. And so they were, Quincy Jones is the person putting all this together, trying to how do you get all these disparate different folks there to get on one accord? And so Waylon Jennings, who was country western legend, he was there. He showed up, and it was tough. He was already there. You know, he was in a space that normally he would be in. And then there's a part of the song, I don't know if you heard it, where there's like this African chant that Michael Jackson wanted part of the song. And so they were getting late in the night, and Waylon Jennings said, "That's it, I'm gone." That's it. I went through all this. Now you doing an African chant. I'm not with it. But really talking about that in terms of, there was this drought in Ethiopia, and how We Are the World was going out as a fundraiser. Pretty much like, everyone kind of remembers Farm Aid, where Queen did their reunion and Freddie Mercury had come out. But this is kind of the same thing. Well, Ugly Stepsister. You have a lot of foreign films here.
Oh yeah, we have about, I want to believe the number is 208 films.
Okay.
So, but a lot of them from just all over the place. I would say very diverse festival program this year.
What about What Happened to Dorothy Bell? Was that one of yours?
That was not, but I am very excited about that one as well.
Talk a little bit about that if you can.
I'll just read off the description for everybody. After uncovering disturbing revelations from her early childhood involving her late grandmother, Ozzie Grace sets out to investigate her past. Desperate for answers, she attempts to communicate with Dorothy's spirit, but unwittingly awakens something malevolent. Following his role as the Candyman in Nia DaCosta's The Candyman from 2021, Michael Hargrove joins iconic Final Girl actor Lisa Wilcox from Nightmare on Elm Street 4 and 5, and Asia Meadows in What Happened to Dorothy Bell. So shaping up to be a very interesting horror film, and me being a horror movie guy with the guy from the newer Candyman, and it's a definite watch for me personally.
So Lisa Wilcox didn't get killed in either of the Elm Streets? She a black actress?
I guess not. I'm not versed on my
there's a great book
Elm
out
Street
there
lore.
called the Black Guy Always Dies First.
Yeah, that's the thing about that phrase though, is that it's hard to find movies where that does happen, but it usually is just like a phrase. Well, it usually is like a phrase to be like, this black character in this movie is disposable, and sometimes it's like they don't even die; they're just like written off.
All of a sudden, right? They're not there. But no, I mean, and then and I think Tony Todd was in the last Candyman, but he has the highest number of kills.
Yeah,
of black people in horror movies. He's been killed so many times because he got killed like 3-4 times in Candyman, came back. But no, the interest in how we try to this balance that you have to have, and then when you see folks, but I just kind of, black horror films are well, they're becoming a thing now.
Yeah, I mean, they have been a thing. It's also, horror is a way to talk about fear without having to actually live the fear for others, and some people still live the fear of whatever real situations they're talking about. So I think horror is just a great medium to talk about like different difficult conversations in black culture as well. So
okay, your Black Lens shorts.
Yeah.
Was that 95 minutes? Is that the title of it?
No, that's just the length of it, but we're going to have 6 films from 6 directors. A few of them will be in attendance. I believe 5 of them. The one we could not get was Glenn Kano from Hopes and Dreams.
Okay.
But we will have the director of About Time, Donald Conley, of, I'm going to butcher this French name, Entre le Feu et la Claire de Lune by Dominique Yabe, Mondel by Daniel Kayamba, Songbird by Jonathan Horton, and Thomasville by Alex Woodruff. So if you're here on Sunday night, April 27th, I believe those people will be in attendance and also doing a Q&A. So if you want to talk to these filmmakers about, their process or just their work, then yeah, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, they have one film here. It says Real Stories of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Playing Basketball.
Yes, that is Hoops, Hopes, and Dreams by Glenn Kano, which is a short film kind of going through the history of how Martin Luther King Jr. would sort of get other people to be involved with his goals politically. And that was by going to where the people were, which was the basketball courts, and being like, hey, this is where the young black men hang out, and I want to get them involved in this movement and show them that, they can be involved. So I'm going to.
There's another spot he would hang out too, which was the pool halls, because he was a pool hustler going back to his college days. Is how he made money. And I was back in the day on the Tom Joyner show. They were interviewing Martin Luther King the third, and I don't know how this came up, but he said, some said, well, your dad was short. He said, but yeah, my dad could play a little ball.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the people said, I have a jumper. I have a jumper. So that'd be very interesting to see Martin Luther King try to play basketball. I have a jumper. Some of these movies, though, and I don't know how involved you are in terms of bringing in some of the so-called international films, but Samaya, which looks like this woman is from Somalia. That's on page 41. Yeah, she's from Somalia, and we just spent the first hour of the program talking about just Africa and culture. But here, this is around East Africa, and there's a lot going on in Somalia right now in terms of folks. One of the I used to do work with refugee populations.
Yeah.
And so if you go to Minneapolis, they have the largest Somalian population in the country. But there is also a group within Somalia who came from Central Africa to work, which they refer to as Bantu people. So in Milwaukee, because you could not put the Bantus with the Somalians because of hostilities, they have settlements here where there's an enormous number of Bantu refugees. Primarily, I'm thinking from, I don't know if it's the Congo or Rwanda, but there where they had gone from Central Africa to Eastern Africa. And then when the Civil War broke out, then pretty much they were either being persecuted or they were expelled. But this is interesting in terms of this is Italian, German, Belgian, and Swedish.
Yes.
And they speak English and Arabic with English subtitles. And I think that's real, because when we think about Africa, Africa is vast. I mean, real and diverse. And I think the only thing a lot of times in Africa, with the exception of those who are in the east, northeast, and those who are in the north there, might be complexion. But for the most part, many Africans kind of look alike. But that should not be, don't let that fool you, because even though they might look alike, they're still very diverse people.
Yeah, just lots of culture in so many different places.
Right, 620 plus languages in the Bantu language. I mean, just showing. Let's see.
I wanted to highlight one of the documentaries I got, Movie a Body, The Birth of House, which goes through the life of Vince Lawrence and just his experiences growing up wanting to make music just because he was creative and said, this is fun. I like doing this. I like sharing this with my friends. And it snowballs into what we have today as house music. And so just going through that entire inception of that, and as well as sort of like a lot of the resistance that house music got with the, the riots, the disco riots. And just sort of existing.
The disco riots, that's interesting because I think Chicago is kind of the birthplace of house music.
Yeah.
And that riot happened at Kaminsky Field, in terms of anti-disco, that pretty much kind of became death knell with disco. There's many of us really doing disco. It's really a musical period. But what's very interesting about this movie, over and beyond the subject matter, is one of the producers is Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Yeah, it is.
What's she know about house?
I learned that after we got the film and booked it, and that was a very big surprise to me. But this is very much this is pretty much Black culture and how music like
it was very fascinating because disco was really as universal as you probably get, because this is where you had black, brown, white, queer folk partying, because it was really about the it's about the love of the music, the movement arcade movement every day. We're inside Community Voice. Williams. I'm Black Lens. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Community Voice on WNOV 860 AM and 106.5 FM with your host, Keith Parris.
All right, welcome back. And we're joined in studio by Mr. Ty Williams. He is the chief programmer for Black Lens, Milwaukee Film. And we're just highlighting some films that will be part of the showings for the, for some of the showings during the Milwaukee Film Festival, which will be held from April 24th to May 8th. What you got?
So we were just talking about Move Your Body, the Bertha House music, one of the documentaries that I got, which will also have the producer, one of the producers, Chester Gordon, in attendance as well. Another documentary I got from Raoul Peck. You may know him from I Am Not Your Negro. And he had created the film Ernest Cole Lost and Found, which is about Ernest Cole, who is essentially the person who put the apartheid on the world stage, bringing the issue up through photographs that were horrific to people and sort of also chronicled his everyday regular life as well. But in this film, in 2017, there were 60,000 of his negatives that were just hidden in a Swedish bank, and Raoul Peck got access to them. So this documentary is primarily told through Ernest Cole's photos that were stolen and now finally have life to tell his story about what he went through during, South African apartheid.
You said you had two more for us.
Yeah, and then I have Color Book, which will also have a Q&A by the director, David Fortune. Their first film, this is their debut film, but it is about a father who is taking care of his son, Mason, who has Down syndrome. They both lose their wife and mother, respectively, and kind of have to process the grief. And it's sort of just about a Black dad who loves his son and wants to be there for him, but also doesn't necessarily have the resources or tools to do so. And is him finding his way to, connect with his son and still be able to take care of him. But very beautiful film, very tender, very sweet. And the last one I have is A Mother Apart, which is about poet and LGBTQ activist Stacey Ann Chin going through her life and how she was basically abandoned by her mother and how that shapes her life today and how she does everything for her daughter in retrospective, thinking of how her mother had treated her growing up and her relationship with her sister and how that also relates to her activism as well. Very intense, powerful film, but very, very worth watching. It is a great story.
I saw one here, and I don't know how familiar you are with Cycle.
Cycle. I did not watch this one yet, but I am very curious about it, so I'm waiting for it to show at the festival. But yeah,
it has a local event here where it says the narrative of police violence in the United States is shaped by viral videos, hashtags, and the cycle of profiling and abuse, followed by law enforcement immunity. The killing of Racine's Tyrese West pushes this narrative forward, exposing the truth behind unchecked police reports when incidents aren't captured for the world to see. Psycho investigates this systemic whitewashing and gives a voice to the countless victims who have names yet to be heard. One of the things with Eric Gardner or George Floyd is that there's video. Mm-hmm. But there are many instances where there is not video. Or if you're Laquan McDonald, they suppress the video, mm-hmm. which would put the police basically be an indictment on how law enforcement interacts with Black and brown bodies.
Yeah. It's with the advancement of technology and the way that, like, I don't know, just the way Black bodies are treated is definitely such an interesting thing at play and how it changes and so rapidly too. So I'm very excited for this film to also discuss that, bring that to light.
414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. If you want to win a set of tickets, you can call in now. Again, the phone number is 414-444-5250. There is a diversity of film offerings.
Oh yeah, there's something for everybody, and I mean everybody.
Whether it's international, national, certainly local, I think it's always great and get a chance to go and see some of these films. Is one We talked about Any Other Way, right? The Jackie Shane story.
Yes.
Okay. And that is directed by, okay. So again, phone lines open 414-444-5250 if you want to win passes to Milwaukee Film, and certainly some of the offerings of Black Lens. It is, like I said, it's a eclectic, diverse offering of films. Throughout, man, just wow. Anything else you wanted to highlight? This is
So after Move Your Body, we will be kind of hosting a Cactus Club house party as well. So after you see the house music documentary, if you're like, I want to go dance to some house music now, then check out Cactus Club. I also wanted to say that if you wanted to check out any of these programs, you can go to milwaukeefilm.org/festival guide, and there should be a way to filter by program. So if you want to see just the Black Lens films, you can. If you want to see just Worldviews films, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and also that Movie Body will have a Q&A as well with the producer, and Color Book will have 2 Q&As as well. So it's gonna be a good time.
Yeah. So if folks, again, they want to, I got a caller. You didn't want tickets. Oh, caller, welcome to the program. Good morning.
Yeah, hi. I was hoping to want some tickets for the film festival.
Oh, you sure did.
Thank you.
So you want to hang on? Make sure you give us your email address because they will be emailed to you. Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate you. Thank you. What else you got going on, Ty?
Just preparing for this film festival mostly. We got 3 days left. And yeah, I've just been helping out at the theater cleaning, as well as furthering my expansion of knowledge of Black cinema and thinking about other stuff that we would like to get at the film or at the theater. But I'm just so excited for this year's film festival. I think it is definitely, I feel like it's the most diverse one we've had in a while. It has the most subjects, the most, I don't know, I feel like it's a really good, it's going to shape up to have some really good conversations happen at the festival.
Wow, this is kind of timely. Green Blah, the history of Green Bay punk rock. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah. That they have a whole punk right there in Green Bay.
Oh yeah, I'd believe it. We have a documentary about Brady Street.
Yeah, that one is really, because Brady Street has very interesting history here.
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like all it takes is you walking down it once to say, "Man, how did this place come to be?"
Man, there used to be a boys club, now Boys and Girls Club over on Franklin, and that was my Boys and Girls Club, boys club then. And so when I was able to get my first place, I wanted to move on the east side because I thought the east side was so cool. Mm-hmm. It was. But I'm gonna tell you another little funky neighborhood though, Bayview.
Bayview.
Yeah, Bayview is.
I hear that about River West, but not Bayview.
Oh man, River West is going too. River West, though, there's some challenges in terms of the neighborhoods that they abut. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's a lot of real good stuff going on. Milwaukee is a city of neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. It really is when you begin to kind of go and even when they talk about Brady Street, because the Italian community was there in that Brady Street area. A lot of Gloriosos and a lot of, I'm trying to think of the bakery there on the corner, still there. The corner of Humboldt and Brady.
Ooh,
Scorantino's.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a whole lot of that was like the Italian neighborhood, and then in the 60s and 70s it became the hippie community because it was cheap. Yeah. Relatively cheap to live, and so this is some good stuff, man. All right, man. Mr. Ty Williams. Milwaukee Film, Black Lens. Again, the Milwaukee Film Festival starts April 24th, runs through May 8th. If you want ticket information, you can call. You got a number, or they can go to the website?
You can go to the website, milwaukeefilm.org. And if you want to see just the festival guide, you can go to milwaukeefilm.org/festival guide and sort or filter by any sort of programs you would like to see.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me as always. It's great to be on again.
All right. We're going to do just a quick little musical break, and then we'll be back to end the program. And we there you go. All right, welcome back to Community Voice. We have a few minutes left. I had not anticipated the conversation that we had with Fern Calker and Aisha Sawyers. It's really, and I know there's a dynamic tension there. And I have to be, I received an email and I want to respond publicly. When Bishop Tutu wrote the book God Is Not a Christian, what he was saying was that God is bigger than religion. But we must also acknowledge that there are people who do not believe in God. And then we must also acknowledge that people have their own distinct pathway to God. And this is just Keith making an observation. It's a critique. Religions, as a general rule, Jermaine was talking about how Christians now, using that term Christian now, does not have the same loaded meaning it had during the time right after the death of Jesus,
Right.
where it was considered a pejorative term. It was a negative term.
Yeah.
And the reason why the Romans thought that Christianity, but they also thought Judaism, I don't know how expansive they were into Asia, but they probably would have had the same attitude towards Buddhists and Hindus, that they felt that their religion was a superior religion.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my frustration when it comes to the Eurocentric part, and look, Christianity is created by Europeans. Would you? And
Yeah.
I'm not any fear of contradiction. I do know the Catholic Church, and then those of us who are now Protestants came out of the Catholic Church. The theology was theology that was formed in the Catholic Church. Some of the theology we deal with now came after the Reformation. But it was a European created religion. As a matter of fact, its Semitic root, there is a distinction. Why do we worship as Christians on Sunday and Jews, which Jesus was, worship on Saturday?
You know what, man? I've been
So they were able to differentiate
Yeah.
between the two religions.
Yeah.
And so what we should be extracting from the religion isn't whether or not it's the right religion. What we should be extracting from religion is the empowerment, how it makes you better, how it impacts your ethics and your values. That's what it is. Now, all this other stuff we do is performative. You know, where people come in and you look all holy and you're dressed up and you shout when you're supposed to shout and you speak in tongues if that's your tradition when you're supposed to do it. But religion should elevate, and we use this term soul, but that inner person. When you hear Bishop Tutu, and let me shout out Dr. Monique cannot think of her name, Dr. Liston. She does Ubuntu. Ubuntu talks about the human connection we have with other human beings. Part of that is from the divine, but how do I interact with other people? When Fern was talking about, she has a friend who's a Muslim, because there's certain things over and beyond where I worship on Saturday or where I worship on Sunday. And even when for those of us who say that they are followers of Christ, Read what Jesus said.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually waiting for that, Keith, because um I did some research myself.
Uh-oh.
And
You looked something up, baby?
yes, sir, Doc. I did some research. And to be honest with you, Christian, that word Christian is only used 3 times in the New Testament. It's Acts 11:26, Acts 26:28, and 1 Peter 4:16. And that word was used to describe the people that follow Jesus, and they called them Chris. That's almost as if, like I said on the break, it was they talked about them them holy rollers, whatever type thing. They used that word to talk about people. And if we're gonna be honest, Jesus never used the word Christian to refer to himself or to his followers.
Well, why would he?
So that's how when Bishop Tutu said that God is not a Christian, I can kind of understand where he was writing it from, because Jesus never called himself a
But he
Christian.
keeps going. He's not a Jew. He's not a Hindu. God is bigger. Man created
Exactly.
religion.
Yeah.
Be clear on it. We created
Yeah.
religion.
Yeah.
We created religion for us either to provide certain values, mores, and laws for society.
Mhm.
It's also our pathway to the creator. But when you look at religion, religion is cultural.
Mhm.
The way Black people worship is cultural.
Mhm.
It's cultural. Now, the sincerity of your worship, that's a different discussion. But the how, the stylistic part of it, that's cultural. And I think that's what Fern was saying. And this is not a criticism or trying to put Christianity down. What is in fact saying is we need to have a clear understanding.
Yeah.
And look, human beings always want to, I'm right.
Yeah.
I'm right. Okay. If your religion is right, then you should be evidence of the rightness of your religion.
Yeah.
Part of it is you can't work for Coke and drink Pepsi.
Yeah.
Caller, welcome to the program.
Yeah. That's almost like wearing Nikes with an Adidas outfit.
Now, some people say you can do that. I try not to mix. Caller, welcome to the program.
Yeah, Keith, says John.
Hey, John.
As usual, you got so much stuff packed into one thing, and my mind is always trying to keep up with you. That last thing really knocked me out, the Coke and Pepsi. Anyways, when you say that it's the Christianity is European, I agree with you about the Protestant coming out of the Catholic and the Byzantine. So then remember, I've been telling you about Coptic, and your lady friend over there, she said Ethiopic. So now you have Coptic of Ethiopia. Coptic means Egyptian. So you got them in communion. Then you got the Syriac, Aramaic, and the Armenian. They're all in communion, and they're all independent, what they call Oriental churches, as distinct from the Eastern Orthodox of the Greco-Roman Byzantine. Then you have the Assyrian Church of the East, and then you have the what they call Uniates, but that's kind of insulting. They call them Eastern Rite Catholics, like the Maronites of Lebanon and the Chaldeans. There's millions of these people.
And we also have Eastern Orthodox, which tends to be more Asian, right? Because isn't it
right.
Constantinople?
In fact, their pictures too, and their pictures. You know how they all say that they pick Jesus as white? Well, the Eastern people, even the Greeks, they have this little funny round halo around them. They're really different from the West. And they say that they picture them wherever you are as an image of your own culture. It's an interesting I read. And you notice they'll have a slightly darker tint on the Eastern Orthodox as well as the independent churches. And if you look up, call it Oriental, look up the Britannica, and then it'll be probably stuff you understand. It's so difficult for me to understand. It'll say, does God come through Jesus as two individuals? Oh, it's so confusing to me. And that's how they claim they have different theologies. But it's really intricate.
It's interesting when you say that, because the way that I was taught the Bible, it was catechism, right? There was programming. I was not taught the Bible from if I went to study religion, for example, right? Because what religion is going to do is it's going to extract out the mysticism. It's going to extract out your sectarian bias. And it's just going to say, here's what the facts are.
Oh, like a college. You mean like
right,
a college?
right. So that's
Yeah.
not how we
Right.
learn the Bible. We learn the Bible to
Right.
support a catechism,
Right.
right? And when you
Right.
look at a lot of what we call theology, the
Right.
we got a few more minutes, man. 3 minutes.
A couple.
Okay. All right. But when you look at that, and the point I'm making is that when you look at the people who have influenced Christian thought, it is Augustine, right?
All those priests.
Right. It was all those folks. It's
priests.
so, and it was
Right.
from a European perspective. That's great. We
Yeah,
do
those
that, but I
synods
have
they
to
had.
I have to remove
Yeah.
that to get to the spiritual piece
Yes.
of that.
Right.
How does
Yeah.
it
That's why I was
elevate?
saying you should go talk to your Coptic people down at the South Side, and I think you would love it. I think you'll love it. It'll probably blow your mind, and you'll understand stuff that I cannot understand because it is so intricate. And you've had training. You know what I mean?
Right.
You have specialized training that the average person cannot understand. Like
Well,
how
I
many
think that's
angels
the
can
difference,
Go
but I
ahead.
think also, again, my lens tends to come from, I study political science, so anything that's political is going to jump out at me, right?
Right.
And so you
right.
understand that. Well, anyway, we go. Let me thank Miss Fern Calker. Let me thank Miss Asha Sawyer, and let me thank Mr. Ty Williams. Debo, thank you. Jermaine, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good Lord, will the creek don't rise. Hope to talk to everybody tomorrow. And as always, go from this place in peace.